Good Monday morning. Good Monday morning, y'all. What's happening? Y'all see the thumbnail? Socialism scare. Is it real? Is it not real? And please hit the like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate it on this Monday morning, right? So before we get started, I want to show you exactly why this conversation exploded over the last few days.
Great night for Democratic Socialist candidates last night. In the New York primaries, they swept and knocked out two incumbents. You're from New York. Why do you think it is that now the endorsement of Zohran Mamdani means more than the endorsement of Hakeem Jeffries?
Well, they're going radical left. They're going really, you talk about the Democrat socialists. It's really communist. These people. I watched that woman last night. That's not a socialist. I know socialists. That woman is a communist. And what they don't say is that I was 16-0 last night. But mine were a little more boring, a little more mainstream. They were Republican conservatives, but we were 16-0. And if you look over the last 2.5 years, we're about 347 and just about 0. That's pretty good. But nobody writes that. But he picked 3. They won. They beat a guy named Dan Goldman, who's, a loser. He was one of my prosecutors, one of my many prosecutors that they used on me. Dan Goldman, not a good prosecutor, fortunately, but he's now looking for a job. I was very surprised to see, because he's a pretty liberal guy. When they go more liberal than Dan Goldman, they're really into Never Land.
Does this tell you that the Democratic Party's 2028 nominee will likely be, or could likely be, a Democratic socialist?
Well, it should make it easier for Republicans, because most of the nation is composed of sane people. And they don't want to... if you look throughout history, go back thousands of years, you've always had socialism and communism by different names. It's never ever worked. It's not going to work this time.
Well, and that's a pretty strong statement, though, right? So, but President Trump didn't simply say he disagrees with Mamdani. He didn't simply say he thinks the Democratic Socialists have bad policies. He didn't say that. He went much further than that. He said they're really communist. And he argued that socialism has failed every place it's ever tried. Now, I understand why millions of Americans hear that argument and immediately become concerned. If your understanding of socialism comes from Soviet Union, Cuba, Venezuela, or other authoritarian governments throughout history, then of course you're going to have those kind of concerns. Those governments became symbols of political oppression, economic hardship, and governments with far too much control over people's lives. Nobody should ignore that history because history matters. But here's where I think we sometimes stop thinking and start reacting. The moment we hear the word socialism, we immediately begin talking about countries that are thousands of miles away instead of asking a simple question. What exactly is Zohran Mamdani asking voters to support? Because whether you agree with him or disagree with this man, that's where the conversation should begin. One of the reasons I became interested in this story is because I noticed something that almost nobody on television was talking about. Everybody wanted to debate whether socialism was dangerous, but very few people actually spent time discussing why Mamdani's message connected with so many people. To me, that's the real story right there, because political movements don't grow simply because somebody gives them a new label. Political movements grow because they convince enough people that they understand problems other politicians either don't understand or haven't been able to solve. That's what caught my attention. As I listened to Mamdani speak during his campaign, I noticed he wasn't spending every speech talking about Karl Marx or socialism or government ownership of private businesses. Instead, he kept returning something much more practical. He talked about rent, food, childcare, transportation, talked about making city government work for the people. He talked about affordability over and over again because that's the issue his voters were living with every day. Now, they don't automatically mean his solutions are the right solutions. Reasonable people can disagree about whether his policies work or not. But if we're going to debate him honestly, then we have to debate the policies he's actually proposing instead of policies we assume that he supports. Because a lot of y'all don't know what socialism is. And what you heard is from Venezuela, Russia, Cuba. That's not the United States. Okay? I think that's one of the biggest problems with modern politics, right? We spend so much time arguing with the caricatures that we never stop to understand the real argument being made. It's much easier to argue against a stereotype than it is to argue against an actual policy proposal. That's why I think what happened in New York deserves more attention than it's getting. This wasn't just one politician winning. This was a politician who openly identifies as a democratic socialist, helping elect 3 more candidates who shared many of the same priorities. That's no longer an isolated victory. That's beginning to look like a movement. Whether that movement succeeds or fails will depend on what happens next. But I don't think anybody can honestly deny that something significant did happen. And here's what I think Republicans, Democrats, and independents should all be asking themselves. Why now? Why are voters responding to this message? Because if the answer is simply people suddenly love socialism, I don't think that explains what we're seeing, right? I think the better answer is that people are looking at their own lives. They're looking at rent that's become harder to pay. They're looking at grocery bills. They're looking at healthcare. They're looking at childcare. They're looking at wages that don't seem to stretch as far as they used to. And when a politician stands up and says, I see these problems and here's what I want to do to help solve them, people won't listen. Again, that don't mean they'll ultimately agree with every proposal that he comes up with. It doesn't mean every proposal will work. It simply means somebody is talking directly about the problems that they're having. I honestly think that's part of this story that's been overlooked. The debate became about the word socialism. You saw the president pull socialism out of his ass. Oh, it's never worked. It's a communist. They're this and that. That's to scare a lot of y'all. And a lot of y'all get scared of that. Somebody say communism, you lose your mind. And a lot of y'all have been trained to think the Democrats are communists, which has got to be the goofiest thing ever, seeing as how we all in the United States. But I digress. That's the honest thing. That's the most honest thing that's being overlooked. The debate became about the word socialism. The election was about affordability. Those are not the same thing. Socialism and affordability are not the same thing. And unless we understand the difference, we're going to keep talking past each other instead of understanding why this movement is growing in the first place. Now, I want you to look at something else, because this is where the story becomes even more interesting. Hold on.
Is the force that we need to vanquish.
Hold on. Let me take this out of here. Okay.
Is the force that we need to vanquish Trump's fascism, to abolish ICE, and to stand up to the billionaires.
Abolish ICE. Free Palestine. Organize your union. And join DSA.
What we have delivered here today is a clear mandate that the era of taking a check and cashing a check and calling it representation is over.
All right. Now that you've seen those results, let's talk about why those results matter. Most people look at those election results and immediately focus on Zohan Mamdani. That's understandable, I get, because he's become the face of this movement. But I actually think it's a bigger story hiding underneath what happened. Winning one election is impressive. I get it. Helping elect other people who share your vision is something entirely different. That's when you stop being a politician with a good campaign and you start becoming the leader of a movement. That's exactly why Republicans are paying attention. That's because it's exactly why it's exactly why the establishment Democrats are paying attention. That's exactly why the media suddenly started asking whether this was the future of the Democratic Party. But I think everybody immediately started asking the wrong question. The question shouldn't be, is socialism taking over America? The question should be, what are these candidates saying that's connecting with so many people? Because that's how politics work. Ideas don't spread because of labels. Ideas spread because they connect with people's everyday lives, right? I don't think millions of New Yorkers woke up one morning and suddenly decided they wanted to become socialists. I think millions of New Yorkers woke up and looked at the cost of living, their rent, grocery, childcare, healthcare, transportation. Then they looked at the politicians who had been promising for years and years to make their life better, and many of them decided they wanted to try something different. What we have going on in the United States right now under this administration is not working for us. It's not working for us. That this is a very different conclusion. One says people have suddenly embraced an economic ideology. We haven't. The other says people are frustrated enough to listen to something else. Those are not the same thing. One of the things I noticed while reading about Mamdani, his campaign was that he rarely led with the word socialism. He led with affordability. That's an important distinction, though, right? He understood something that every successful politician eventually learns. People don't spend most of their day thinking about political philosophy. They spend most of their day thinking about how can they afford to pay their rent. They think about whether they can pay next month's rent, grocery, pay the car note, take the kid to the doctor, buy a home. That's where people live. That's where elections are won. I think sometimes people in politics forget that. They spend so much time arguing about ideology that they stop talking about everyday life. Mamdani didn't make that mistake. Whether you agree with him or you disagree with him, he kept bringing the conversation back to the same simple question. Why has life become unaffordable? Why has life become expensive? That's a question millions of people were already asking themselves. He just introduced them to a new problem. No, he wasn't. He just introduced them to a new solution. I'm sorry. He was acknowledging the problem they were already living with, and that's why I don't think people were responding to the label of socialism. They were responding to the message. Let's think about it from the perspective of an ordinary working family. If you're paying more for rent than you did 3 years ago, if your grocery bill keeps going up, insurance going up, childcare going up, if you're working just as hard but the money is shorter, are you really spending your evenings and nights worried about socialism? Of course not. You're looking for somebody, anybody who seems to understand what you're going through. That's what campaigns are all about. They're about convincing people that you understand their problem. Trump did it. He made a lot of y'all believe that he actually understood y'all's problems. That's why y'all voted for him. And now look at the mess that we in, of course. Okay. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes they deliver, sometimes they don't. Okay. Whether you can solve these problems is something voters discover after the election. We discovered after the election, Trump can't solve these problems. But before they even cast a vote, before you cast a vote, you want to know one thing. Does this person understand what my life looks like? I think Mamdani answered that question in a way that connected with a lot of voters. Now, does that mean his policies will work everywhere? I don't know. Nobody knows. Campaigns are promises. Government is performance. Those are two different things. It's easy to promise affordable housing. It's much harder to build it. It's easy to promise lower costs. Much harder to deliver. Now here comes the difficult part. Now he has to govern. Now his ideas have to move beyond campaign speeches and become measurable results. And honestly, I think that's exactly where the focus should be. Instead of arguing for the next 4 years about whether Mamdani is a Democratic socialist, why don't we ask a much better question? Does he improve lives? Does housing become more affordable? Is government more responsive? Did working families feel less pressure? Did public transportation improve? Did he make good on some promises and convince some people to vote for him? Because at the end of the day, that's the standard every elected official should be judged by. Did you keep the campaign promises that you promised? Not the slogans they use, not make America great again. Who gives a fuck about making America great again? It ain't great right now. Not the political movement that they belong to, not the ideology that they embrace. Did they make your life better? Did they improve your life? The people who trusted you. That's the question I hope Americans keep asking. Because if we judge politicians by results instead of rhetoric, I think our politics will become a whole lot healthier. And that's where I think the story takes another interesting turn, because it wasn't just Republicans who reacted to these victories. Establishment Democrats reacted too. And I think their reaction tells us just as much about what's happening inside the Democratic Party as Trump's reaction tells us about the Republicans. Let me roll this clip.
I'm Matt Gelka at the Capitol, where establishment Democrats are grappling with the big Democratic Socialist wins in primaries around the country. Two sitting Democrats in Congress were primaried in New York Tuesday night, defeated by candidates backed by New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani and the Democratic Socialist movement that propelled him to victory.
And what I see these results as a reflection of are the fact that New Yorkers are hungry for a new kind of politics. They are hungry for a politics that understands working people should be at the heart of it.
Another Mamdani-backed candidate won the primary for an open house seat in the city. The New York mayor went 3 for 3 with people he endorsed. 2 of the 3 winners are affiliated with Democratic Socialists. If they go on to win in November, they'd join Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Rashida Tlaib in Congress and increase DSA representation. Republicans rush to label Democrats as the party of socialism.
Hearing me say for weeks there are many Mamdanis popping up all around the country. It is a dangerous thing. This is not a joke. We're in a fight right now to save the republic. And every American needs to take this seriously. You need to wake up.
What they ought to do is look to see whether socialism worked where it's been tried. It's not like it hasn't been tried in the world. It's been tried in Western Europe. It's been tried in England. It's failed miserably.
The Democratic establishment took it on the chin in New York. House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries backed the incumbents that lost to Mamdani's picks. More moderate Democrats ended up winning in other primaries around the country, like Maryland and Utah, and the party's leadership in Congress tried to downplay the ripple effects.
I think the goal is to win as many seats currently held by Republicans as possible and take back control of the House of Representatives.
Is Mamdani making enemies on Capitol Hill by endorsing against incumbents right now?
Listen, the mayor and I agreed to strongly disagree about some of his endorsements, and he's got work to do in terms of the conversations that he's going to have with members of Congress moving forward.
Now, I think we can better understand why Hakeem Jeffries responded the way he did. That wasn't just a response to Zohran Mamdani. That was a response to what those election results might mean for the Democratic Party going forward. I think that's an important distinction, because I don't believe establishment Democrats are sitting around asking themselves whether America is becoming socialist. I think they're asking themselves why Democratic primary voters are increasingly looking outside of the party establishment. Those are two completely different questions, though. Remember, Mamdani didn't defeat a Republican. He endorsed candidates. His endorsed candidates didn't defeat Republicans either. They defeated other Democrats. That's what makes the story so politically significant, though. This isn't just a debate between Republicans and Democrats. This has become a debate inside the Democratic Party itself. One side believes the party should continue moving cautiously, building coalitions and making incremental changes. The other side is saying people are hurting right now and incremental change ain't enough. Whether you agree with either side is not really the point. The point is that this debate is now happening out in the open. And if you listen carefully to Jeffries, you could hear the balancing act he was trying to make. On one hand, he doesn't want to publicly attack Mamdani, especially someone who is now one of the most recognizable Democrats in the country. On the other hand, he also has to reassure his members of Congress who just watched incumbents lose to candidates backed by Mamdani. That's not an easy position to be in, because every political party eventually has to answer the same question. Do we stay with what we've already been doing, or do we try something new? Okay, that's why I think the Democratic Party finds itself today. But here's something I think both parties need to understand. This conversation isn't happening because Americans suddenly woke up fascinated by political philosophy. Most people couldn't give a fuck about whether a politician calls themselves a progressive, moderate, liberal, conservative, or democratic socialist. Most people care about whether they can pay the bills. I know that's not exciting political analysis. It doesn't make the dramatic television, but that's the truth. People vote based on the lives that they're living. When life feels stable, people usually aren't looking for dramatic political change. When they're stable and they're happy, they're not looking for nothing to change. Right now, ain't nobody happy. At least 75% of the country is pissed off. They can't stand what's going on, and they looking for something different. That's why the Republicans are going to be shellacked, because they don't want the Republican agenda anymore. Not right now. Not with their lives the way they are. Okay. When people feel uncertain, life is expensive, getting difficult, getting more expensive, that's when people want to change. That's why I think affordability has become the most powerful political issue in America. It cuts race, age, party, young people trying to buy a house, experiencing bad family issues, people got to move in with each other, all kinds of stuff. A retiree struggling, parents paying more. Mamdani, that's why I think Mamdani's campaign connected with so many people. Again, whether his ideas ultimately succeed is a complete separate issue. But he recognized something that many politicians have forgotten. People don't vote based on policy. People vote based on whether they believe you understand the life that they're living. That's one of the reasons great politicians are great storytellers. They don't begin with statistics. They begin with people, families, struggles, and Mamdani talks about affordability. He's not introducing New Yorkers to a problem they didn't know existed. He's putting words to frustrations they've been living with for years. And I honestly think that's what many commentators are missing. They're treating this as an ideological revolution. They're treating it like a socialism, like it's something bogeyman or something like that. He's doing something very practical. I think this is very practical. I think millions of people are simply saying, we don't want to deal with what we're dealing with right now, and we need somebody to take this garbage away from our life. Okay? Now, here's where I think the Republicans have a tremendous opportunity, though. If you believe Mamdani's solutions are wrong, then don't spend all your time attacking the label Democratic Socialist. Offer a better solution. Offer better policies. Show people how conservative policies will lower housing costs. Show the conservative people or people who would vote for a conservative how you would give them affordable health care, how you would be able to give them cheaper groceries, less expensive housing, rent. Explain how their health care costs will go down. Show families how your ideas, Republican ideas, will leave more money in their pockets every month, because eventually every political movement arrives at the same place, okay? Results, not rhetoric, results. Same challenge applies to Mamdani. Campaigns are about promises. Government is about performance. If housing becomes more affordable, if public service improves, if working families feel their finances are getting better, then his movement will probably continue growing. If those things don't, if the Republicans don't turn this shit around, if they don't course correct the bullshit that they have been doing, voters will do exactly what Americans have always done. They'll elect somebody else. And that's the part of this story that's actually giving me hope. Despite all the yelling, despite all the political commercials, the accusations, American people still have the final say. They always do. Politicians come and go. Movements rise and fall. Parties win and lose. But every few years, voters get an opportunity to decide whether the people they elected eventually deliver what they promised. That's not socialism. That's not capitalism. That's democracy. And I think that's exactly where this conversation should stay. I think we finally arrived at the part of this conversation where people on both sides should probably stop and listen. Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or whether in between. I don't think the question is whether Zohan Mamdani believes in democratic socialism. He's never hidden that fact. He's been very open about it. The real question is why that label didn't stop people from voting for him. Why did y'all vote for him? If everybody was so scared of socialism, why did y'all vote for him? Because for decades, being called a socialist was supposed to end your political career in America. You're supposed to be scared of the boogeyman, the socialist. Ooh! It was supposed to be the ultimate political attack. If your opponent could successfully convince voters you were a socialist, the campaign was practically over. So why didn't that happen this time? Why did people vote for the socialists? I think the answer is actually much simpler than people want to admit. People don't vote based on fear when they're already living in fear. Think about it for a minute. If you're worried about losing the house, the car, the rent, the blah, 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 the whole nine, calling a politician a socialist ain't necessarily the first thing on your mind. If you're worried about how you're going to pay the healthcare costs and all this, don't nobody care about no Karl Marx. If you're working full time and still can't seem to get ahead, you're naturally going to listen to the person who says, I see what's happening, and I think governments has a responsibility to do something about it. That's what I think happened in New York. Mamdani didn't spend his campaign trying to convince people to become a democratic socialist. He spent his campaign convincing people that he understood why life had become more expensive. Those are two completely different messages. One is ideological, the other is personal. And people always respond more strongly to something that affects their personal lives. When I started reading more about this campaign, one thing kept coming up over and over again: affordability. That was his campaign. Not socialism, affordability. He talked about stabilizing rents, housing crisis, child care, public transportation, taxing the rich. Now, you may completely disagree with all of that. You may believe higher taxes discourage investment or slow economic growth. That's a legitimate policy debate. But notice what we're debating now. We're debating taxes now. We're debating housing now. We're debating transportation. We're debating healthcare. Those are real policy discussions. We're no longer simply shouting the word socialism back and forth. And I honestly think that's where this conversation needs to stay. One of the biggest mistakes we made in politics is assuming that because we reject one proposal, we have to reject every proposal made by that person. Life does not work that way. Politics shouldn't either. Maybe you agree with Mamdani on housing, but disagree with him on taxes. Maybe you support stronger transportation, but don't support expanding government in other areas. Maybe you like his focus on affordability. Okay? That's called thinking for yourself. That's called evaluating ideas one at a time instead of accepting or rejecting an entire political philosophy all at once. I wish more Americans approach politics that way, because I don't think anybody has a monopoly on good ideas, right? Republicans have good ideas. Democrats have good ideas. Progressives have good ideas. Conservatives have good ideas. The challenge isn't finding people with ideas. The challenge is figuring out which ideas actually improve your life. And that's where I think Mamdani has changed the conversation. Whether he intended to or not, he has shifted the debate away from abstract political philosophy and towards everyday lives. Listen to what people are talking about now. They're talking about rent, grocery, childcare, wages. They're talking about whether local government can actually improve their quality of life. That's a healthier political conversation than simply accusing one another of destroying America. Because every time I turn around, I hear a Republican or conservative talking, Democrats gonna destroy the America. They ain't destroyed America yet. Fuck are you talking about? What the fuck are you talking about? My fucking rent is $2,000. What are you talking about? Socialism. Help me pay my rent. Shut up and help me pay my rent. Okay? That's one of the biggest problems right now. The politicians are talking at people and not talking to the people. Okay? This is where every election official is going to be judged by what they can do, not by their speeches, not by their ideology, by their performance. If Zoran Mamdani succeeds in making life more affordable for New Yorkers, his movement will almost certainly continue growing because people respond to the results. If he fails, voters will hold him accountable. As far as I understand, he balanced the budget, got people money during the wintertime, taxed the rich. Couple of things I done heard that he did. I don't know. It's not a weakness in democracy. That's one of his greatest strengths. Every election gives politicians an opportunity. The next election gives voters the opportunity to decide whether that trust was earned. And honestly, I think that's exactly how it should be. So maybe the question ain't about whether America should be afraid of democratic socialism. Maybe the question is much simpler. Can Zoran Mamdani deliver on the promises that made millions of people believe in him in the first place? Because if he can, the conversation inside the Democratic Party is going to become even bigger. If he can't, then this movement may simply become another chapter in American political history. Either way, the answer won't come from campaign speeches. It will come from results. And I think that's exactly where every American should keep their attention. Okay. Now, I want to spend few minutes talking directly to the people who are genuinely nervous about what happened in New York, because I don't think they're crazy. I don't think they should be dismissed. If you're sitting there thinking, hey, TPP, I hear everything you're saying, but I don't still trust this Democratic Socialist label. I understand that. You should be cautious anytime a politician asks government to play a larger role in people's lives. I get that. That's a healthy instinct. Government has made mistakes throughout history. Republican administrations, Democratic administrations, governments all over the world. Healthy skepticism is part of being a responsible citizen. That's why you should always question your government. But skepticism and fear are not the same thing. Skepticism asks questions. Fear stops asking questions. That's the difference. I think every American should be skeptical of politicians, regardless of what party they belong to. If somebody tells you that they have all the answers, I immediately become suspicious. If somebody tells me government can solve every problem, I'm skeptical. If somebody tells me government is the problem in every situation, I'm skeptical as well. Because life is rarely that fucking simple. What I find interesting about this conversation is that many people are reacting to what they think Mamdani believes instead of what he's actually saying. Listen to his speeches, read his campaign platform, watch his interviews. Whether you agree with him or disagree with him, you'll notice that he keeps bringing the conversation back to the same place. How do we make life affordable? Housing, childcare, public transportation. How do we make city government work for ordinary people? Those are the questions he's asking. Now his answers involve a larger role for government than many conservatives would like. That's a legitimate disagreement, but disagreement isn't the same thing as danger. Like Mike Johnson said the other, it's dangerous to elect these socialists. They're just trying to throw fear at you. One of the reasons I wanted to make this video is because I think we've reached a point where we've forgotten how to separate those two ideas. We have somehow convinced ourselves that if somebody proposes a policy we disagree with, they must somehow be trying to destroy America. Those Democrats are trying to destroy America. I don't believe that. I think most people in politics, regardless of party, believe they're trying to improve a country. They simply disagree about how to do it. And honestly, that's always been true. Ronald Reagan believed smaller government would strengthen America. Roosevelt believed a larger federal role was necessary during the Great Depression. Johnson believed expanding Medicaid and Medicare would improve the lives of millions of Americans. And Donald Trump believes tariffs would strengthen American manufacturing. Joe Biden believed major infrastructure investments would strengthen our economy. Different presidents, different philosophies, different approaches. The American people looked at those ideas and made decisions through elections. That's how it's supposed to work. Which brings me back to Mamdani. I don't think Americans should vote for him simply because he calls himself a democratic socialist. I also don't think Americans should reject him simply because he calls himself a democratic socialist. I think they should do exactly what they should do with every politician. Ask questions, demand evidence. If he says he can make housing more affordable, hold him to it. If he says he can improve city services, hold him to it. If he says he can make government work better for ordinary people, measure whether he actually does it. Because that's accountability, not fear, accountability. And when you hear a Republican say, and I'm saying Republicans because they're the first ones out the door talking about socialism and they're going to destroy the country, I hope Republicans take away from this moment is that calling someone a socialist may not be enough. That makes no sense. Okay. Measure a person by what they say and measure whether they actually do it, whether they're democratic socialists or not. Okay. If voters believe their lives are becoming harder, they're going to want more than warnings. They're going to want solutions. Republicans, come up with some solutions. Don't bash the Democrats. Come up with your own affordable health care plan, your own free college, your own whatever the Democrats have on their side. Okay? Don't bash the Democrat. Present your ideas. If your ideas are better than the Democrats, present your ideas. People want solutions. And I think that's where conservatives that should have an opportunity. Instead of simply saying, don't vote for Mamdani, explain your policy about affordable housing. Explain how your economic plan helped reduce costs of living. Compete for the voters by giving them a better answer, a better policy. Not just a scary, ooh, socialism, ooh, it's dangerous. Don't do that. Don't try to win on bullshit. Nobody cares about culture issues right now. They shouldn't. They should be caring about economic issues. Okay? Compete for the voters by giving them a better answer, not just trying to be scary, because ultimately that's what democracy is supposed to be: competing visions, competing ideas, competing solutions. Then let the voters decide which vision they believe in that will improve their lives. That's what happened in New York. People heard competing arguments from the Republicans, from the Democrats, from I don't know who they was running against with Mamdani. They made a choice. They wanted to go with Mamdani. Now the burden shifts from the voters to the people they elected. Now it's Mamdani's responsibility to prove that his message can become measurable results. That's the standard, not the campaign, not the speeches, not the slogans, the results. And if he succeeds, people will continue to listen to the man. Okay? If he fails, they'll look somewhere else. That's not socialism. That's democracy, working exactly the way it was supposed to work. I honestly think that's the lesson people should take away from everything we've discussed. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to challenge politicians. Don't let fear keep you from understanding why millions of people found Mamdani's message compelling in the first fucking place. Because until we understand that, we'll never understand what really happened in New York. Okay? And as I was thinking about everything we talked about, I kept coming back to one final question. What happens if Mamdani succeeds? I'm not asking whether you think he will succeed. I'm asking what happens if he does succeed? Because I think that's the question both political parties should be asking themselves. Let's imagine that 4 years from now, New Yorkers are paying less for housing, less for childcare, transportation, less taxes. If that happens, do you honestly think people are going to vote against him simply because somebody called him a democratic socialist? I don't. I think they'll vote for him because they believe he made their lives better. That's how politics work. People don't usually reward politicians because they won an argument on TV. They reward politicians because they believe those politicians delivered the results. And let's look at the other side of the coin. What if he don't succeed? What if housing remains just as expensive? What if government becomes larger but doesn't become more efficient? What if taxes increase but people don't see meaningful improvements in their lives? Then voters will almost certainly move on. That's the beauty of democracy. Nobody gets to keep power simply because they have a compelling campaign message. Eventually, every politician has to produce results. I think that's exactly where this conversation belongs, not on labels, on outcomes. One of the mistakes we make in American politics is that we often argue about theories while ordinary people are living with realities. The theory is democratic socialism. The reality is that a family is wondering whether they can afford to pay rent. The theory is capitalism. The reality is that a young couple has decided they cannot have another child because it costs too much. The reality is the senior citizen has to cut prescriptions in half because they can't afford a full refill. Okay? This is real. This is where politics live. Not cable news, think tanks, social media. Politics live around the kitchen table. Lives in family budgets. It lives in conversation between husband and wife trying to figure out how they're going to pay the bills next month. That's where elections are decided. I think Mamdani understood something that many politicians have forgotten. People want to know that you see them. Before they'll trust your solutions, they have to believe you understood their struggle. That's one of the reasons his message resonated. Whether his policies ultimately work is a completely separate conversation. But I don't think anybody can deny that he successfully convinced many voters that he understood what they were experiencing. That's not a small thing. Empathy matters in politics. Connection matters in politics. People want to feel like people asking for their vote actually understands what their daily lives look like. That's true whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. I also think Republicans should pay close attention to this moment because I don't believe the answer is simply calling everything socialism. It's going to backfire. If voters continue feeling squeezed financially, eventually that message loses its effectiveness. People eventually begin to ask a certain question. Okay, if his ideas are so fucking terrible, what are your ideas? That's a fair question, right? Every political party should have an answer to it. Don't just tell me why the other side shouldn't give me universal health care. Don't just tell me why the other side shouldn't get free lunch. Don't just tell me the other side shouldn't have free college. Tell me what you're going to do. Tell me what you're going to do. Don't just tell me why I shouldn't vote for Mamdani because he's a socialist. Tell me how you're going to make my rent more affordable, healthcare, groceries, bills, kids, better life. That's the competition I want to see in American politics. People should. Not who can scare me the most about socialism. Who can convince me the most? Who has the better ideas, better plan, better record, better vision for ordinary people? Because at the end of the day, that's who should win. Not the person with the best slogan, not the person with the best attack ad, the person with the best solutions for the American people. Maybe that's the biggest lesson from New York. Maybe this election wasn't really about democratic socialism. Maybe it was about millions of people saying they're tired of hearing politicians describe how great the economy is while their own bank account tells them something completely different. That's a message every politician should hear. Not just Democrats, not Republicans, every politician. Because if the American people are telling you that life has become too expensive, the answer can't simply be to tell them they're wrong or you can't vote for the other guy because he's a socialist. You have to give them a reason to believe tomorrow can be better than today. I think that's why this election matters. Not because it proves Democrat socialism in the future of America, and not because it proves capitalism has failed. It matters because it reminds us that voters will always gravitate toward the people they believe are speaking honestly about the problems that they're living every day. And Mamdani tapped into that. Whether those politicians ultimately deserve that trust is something one only time and results can answer. Okay. I don't believe America's standing at the edge of a socialist revolution. I don't believe that. I don't believe the Constitution is about to disappear either. I don't believe we're one election away from becoming Venezuela. I also don't believe that people are concerned about democratic socialism, or are they foolish or uninformed? I think many of these concerns come from a very real place because history has shown us that governments, regardless of what they call themselves, can become too powerful if citizens stop paying attention. History teaches us to be cautious. It does not teach us to stop thinking, though. That's the difference. If there's one thing I hope people take away from this discussion, is that fear should never replace understanding. The easiest thing in politics is to make people afraid. That's the easiest thing. Ooh, he's a socialist. Ooh, it's a dangerous way. It's dangerous to go down that route. Fear is easy. Understanding takes a little time. It's easy to make a 30-second campaign commercial, frightening people, giving them images and telling people that America's heading toward disaster. It's much harder to explain complicated economic policies, discuss trade-offs, and have honest conversation about what government should and shouldn't be doing. Unfortunately, fear usually wins because it's simple. It's probably people in my chat right now talking about, oh, y'all just want free shit. Y'all just want free shit instead of really doing critical thinking. That's why I can't engage. I can't engage with certain people. I can't engage with that simplistic mind thought, that simplistic mind frame. I just can't. Because if all you have to say is people just want free shit, then you fail to grasp any of the things that I'm talking about. Okay. That's why I keep coming back to Mamdani. Whether you agree with him or disagree with him, I don't think he won because people suddenly became experts on socialism and things like that. Free shit. I think he won because he convinced enough people that he understood why they were struggling. That's an important distinction. People weren't applauding because he used the word socialism. They were applauding because he talked about everyday problems that they were dealing with every day. Talked about housing, affordability, childcare, transportation, all those things. Those aren't abstract political ideas. Those are everyday lives. And here's what I think every politician in America should learn from this election. People don't need you to tell them the economy is doing well if they can feel it. People don't need another politician explaining statistics while they're standing in the checkout line waiting for their grocery bill every month. People don't need another speech about how great America is while they're wondering whether they'll ever be able to buy a home. People want somebody who understands what they're experiencing. That's what this election was about. Recognition. connection, hope. Now, whether Mamdani can actually deliver on those promises and his people that he backed can deliver on those promises is a completely different question. Campaigns are emotional. Government is practical. During a campaign, you can inspire people with speeches all day. Once you're in office, speeches stop paying the bills. Now people want results. Can you actually build more housing? Can you actually improve their lives? Can you help bring gas prices down, housing prices down, rent down? That's where this story goes next. And I honestly think that's exactly where our attention should stay. The campaign promises. Let's stop arguing about labels for a minute. Let's watch what happens. Let's measure the results. Let's see where the promises take us. If they do take us where reality is, people will continue to support them. If they don't, they'll vote for somebody else. That's not socialism. That's democracy. That's accountability. And that's exactly why our system is supposed to work the way it does. You know what gives me confidence about this country, though? It's not about Republicans winning. It's not about Democrats. It's not about one political philosophy eventually defeating one or the other. What gives me confidence is that American people always get another opportunity to evaluate the people they elected. Nobody gets to stay in office forever. Nobody gets permanent power. Every election is another opportunity for the American people to ask one simple question. Did you make my life better than it was before I voted for you? I honestly think that's the only question that really matters. Now, whether a politician calls themselves conservative or liberal or democratic socialist, did the community improve? Did your children get better lives? Did the family get better lives? Did you be able to afford more groceries? Did the government become more responsive? Quality of life go up? Those are the questions I hope Americans start asking more and more. Because if we spend all of our time arguing over labels, we'll never notice whether the people we elected are actually solving the problems we hired them to do. And maybe that's the biggest lesson in New York. Voters weren't just sending a message about democratic socialism. They were sending a message about frustration, affordability. Okay? So, if you like the content, please hit the like, share, and subscribe. And I will be back later today with more content. I appreciate all of you guys coming out this early Monday morning. I appreciate you. Hi, you. Hi, I saw you, but I didn't say hi. Okay. Credit for social country by claiming they are mostly white. I'm confused. Okay. I didn't get any questions in the comment section. Maybe I did. I didn't really hear. Nobody said anything about favoring socialism. I believe in socialism to a certain extent. Most people do. Okay. So it is what it is. Okay, name a president that delivered anything. Most presidents deliver something. Who knows? Obamacare, Joe Biden infrastructure bill, Trump with some kind of crime bill. Something. That's just goofy on your part. Okay, minimum wage is a socialist policy. That's crazy. That's wild. But it is what it is. Everyone, rent-free is a terrible idea. Who knows? Why would it be a terrible idea? If you're not a landlord, why are you worried about landlords getting paid money? Makes no sense. Okay? Price of the balance in America isn't balanced. Donald Trump is terrible with budgets. It is what it is. It is what it is. The rich hoarding the wealthy. Yeah, well, they're hoarding, so we need to start making them pay. Okay? Get jobs, you guys are so lazy. Are you goofy? Are you goofy? Are you goofy, Kimberly? Are you goofy? Man, there's always going to be a segment of the population that is going to be lazy. There's always going to be a segment of the population that's going to not want to work. That's in black, white, Hispanic, Asian, all groups. Shut the fuck up. This is dumb. Okay? It's just dumb. Most people got a job. Most people are employed. Okay? Yes. So the Pentagon is balanced. Nobody said anything about the Pentagon, but hey, it is what it is. It is what it is. Existing people, okay. Listen to what Trump said about Washington. No bullshit lies. Florida's hell on earth. Florida, never been to Florida, ain't trying to go to Florida. Bad illegal, then wouldn't come. So please put your like, share, hit the like button, share the content. Please subscribe if you can. I would love to have you as a viewer. I have content like this every day. I try to have it every mostly Monday through Thursday at 10 o'clock, but I throw some stuff in there sometime like today and maybe tomorrow. Who knows? So I am TPP. Please hit the like and share, and I will see you this evening or tomorrow morning. It just depends, either in the morning or in the evening. It just depends on how I feel, if I have a subject that I want to talk about. And I appreciate all of you guys showing up. I appreciate you guys. Appreciate you. Appreciate you.